the Fueled by Death guest.
So let's start in the beginning. You have such an extensive career and have touched so many different areas of movie, television, voice acting, music, the whole nine. And I'm always curious, talking to someone like you, where did it all come from? Where were you inspired, maybe as a kid or a young adult, to actually start looking into becoming an actor?
Well, the music stuff started first. I was around 16 or so, 15, 16, when I picked up guitar. I started taking lessons, and shortly thereafter playing in bands and things. And so I was still in high school. My brother was a drummer, and he still is. And he and I played in the same band throughout most of the high school years. And then subsequently took off after high school to go study theater. And so I did that for 4 years, 4.5, and then came back to California. So the music was first, the acting and such came up second. And then after moving to LA, I pursued both, sort of on a parallel track, but mostly the acting work, because there was a lot more of that going on, and much more potential to book those kinds of gigs back then than there was, musically, beyond a certain point. Like, I did play in a band for a couple of years. I did live gigs in town, at one particular club for almost 2 years at the time, which helped me support myself in terms of rent and things like that. It was great because I only had to work a few hours a night, and I could, make the rent every month and still pursue acting work in the daytime. So that was very cool. And then eventually the acting work took off. So, like I said, musically, I've been, involved in music for 40 years, over 40 years now, because I started when I was 16. And then the acting sort of kicked in mostly after high school, and then subsequently after moving to LA and just starting to pursue it in I think it was 81 when I moved here.
Wow.
Wow. What inspired you musically? What kind of music did you play? What kind of were you looking at as far as idols at the time you started playing music, as to, where you are musically now?
Well, it was a pretty wide variety of stuff. I mean, obviously I grew up in the 60s. I mean, the Beatles were an influence on all of us. The super groups behind that, everybody from Santana to Led Zeppelin to Chicago. Eventually got into some early Genesis. Then I got into, even folk rock at the time as well. Chapin, Cat Stevens, all those guys.
Yeah.
And then eventually, and then R&B, Kool and the Gang, a bunch of other, top R&B artists at the time, all the way through the 70s and early 80s and things. And then later on, people like Bruce Hornsby, Kev Moe, Johnny Lang, there's Steve Winwood. There's a lot of artists that sort of, that I sort of gravitated to after that, in that period of time. And now it's just a matter of hearing, certain tracks here and there that I might find that I hear and listen to, and I'll pick them up and say, hey, this is pretty cool. I like this. Or I might want to cover that song over there because it kind of fits into what I'm doing. So, it was a variety of people over the time, a variety of artists and bands over the time that really influenced me.
It's great that you continue to do both. Like, so many people strike out in this world and are like, I've got one track mind, I'm going to be a musician, or I'm going to be the actor, or I'm going to be the rocket scientist, or whatever it's going to be. And like you said, music came first, but you really attacked them both. And to this day, you still are playing and you're still acting. Have you ever found that to be tough? Has it ever been tough for you to juggle both?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, one of the more recent gigs I did was an appearance on NCIS New Orleans, and I had an opportunity to actually play
awesome.
That's
guitar
cool.
live on the show, because they filmed everything live. and we were in New Orleans shooting. And when I interviewed for the role, they asked me, do you play guitar? I said, yeah, I do play guitar, and they wanted to hear how well I could play. So I had to send them a videotape of me playing guitar, blues guitar particularly, and they cast me as a result of that. I was able to go down there, meet some musicians from there who were local, work out in the studio for 7 or 8 hours, and then start filming the next week, and recording and playing these songs, live on film, which is usually not how it's done. Usually it's all recorded prior, and then we just sync sound to it when we shoot. But they wanted us to play it and do it live. And it was absolutely amazing. It was fantastic. Very fun experience because I got to do both. I got to play the role and then also play music. So, that combination doesn't come by very often, but here I was ready to go ahead and do it. If I had laid the guitar down, 12, 15, 20 years ago, then I would not have been able to do that. And it's not difficult. I manage my band, so I just book them whenever I feel like booking them.
Yeah.
And it's fairly easy. We're not doing tours. I'm not trying to, go out and promote, CD sales. I have them on iTunes and all those other places, but I don't, I'm not doing that as a full-time thing by a long shot. It's just part-time, just enough to keep my chops up and enjoy doing it,
Yeah, that makes sense. So, speaking on musicians in film, one of the cool things that we found out is that your first movie role was on Crossroads. How cool was that as a musician to be in that movie with Steve Vai?
That was cool because I got a chance to work with Ry Cooder, on some slide guitar because I hadn't done that much slide before then. And so I sat down with him. We had a session. We went over the track. It's Crossroads, the original cut of Crossroads by Robert Johnson. And it's a very different piece than, for example, Clapton's version. Very, very different. It's totally fluid and improvised, and it's just him and the guitar. And it's the timing is there's no set time to it. So it's a real tricky piece to learn. So we did the tuning on the guitar, we did the slide, and when we filmed it, I played the song right alongside the track. I just sang it live and played it live right alongside the track, and that's what they filmed. So it was very cool. Yeah.
So cool. Can you speak a little bit, like some of your first roles, like Crossroads, and also like in TV, you did Hill Street Blues and early stuff with Twilight Zone, and can you speak a little bit about like what it was like working in the industry then as opposed to now? Are there changes for the better or worse? I'm always curious, especially with actors who've been in the industry for a number of years to get a perspective on that.
Yeah, it's different. It's very different. There's, when I started out, there were still only 3 major stations, actually 4 major stations on television. And they did not have the cable networks they have now. They did not have Netflix. None of that existed. So it was primarily 4 networks. Most of them shot right here in L.A. The feature films, a lot of those shot here. And there were a lot more guest star roles available as a result of all those series shooting here. Hour-long dramas. That's a lot of programming, per week, per night. And all those shows had guest spots on them, and under 5s. And if you're starting out as an actor, you generally start out doing small bit roles, walk-ons. He went that away, whatever. And that's how you get your credits built up, and then eventually you get into bigger and bigger roles. And that's what I did. But the environment, the landscape was very, very different then. The money was different as well. Now, you have, because of technology, you have people, anybody and everybody that can raise a few bucks and get a couple of cameras and a laptop together can shoot a movie. And so you have a ton of low budget stuff that's out there that you cannot make a living doing. You cannot survive doing that stuff. It becomes more of a hobby for people in many cases rather than a career. The number of shows and television and movie projects are now shooting out of state. They're not shooting here anymore, so a lot of those roles are cast in other places. that cuts down on the number of parts available. And the money is not the same as it used to be unless you're on very literally on the top 3 networks still, or the top cable stations that have series. Right. So as far as working goes, it's very different than when I was here. I think it's a hell of a lot tougher to try to make a living out of it. That being said, there's more opportunities for people to actually produce their own content or their own material or their own projects because of the technology and how cheap it is. Well, not cheap, but how much less it is to be able to do that on your own rather than waiting for a studio opportunity to come up to go get it. So there's a plus and a minus side, and it is definitely a different landscape. It is a whole new world, which doesn't really have a plateau. It just seems to keep changing and evolving. But compared to what it used to be when I started out, I tell people who ask me about it, I tell them the first thing you've got to do is look at the environment you got to work in and what's going on and what it's going to be like to try to make a living out of doing this, as opposed to, like I said, doing it as a hobby. You want to do it as a hobby? Fantastic. But if you want to try to make a living at it, you are going to have a hell of a tough time, just based on the fact that the production, the way the production is, where it goes on, most of it is run away and not here. The opportunities are fewer, and their competition is just as fierce, if not more, than it was before. So it's that much tougher to book these things and get stuff going.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost the same landscape parallel with the music industry.
Totally.
Technology has driven a totally different environment that is, everybody can do it, but it waters everything down.
Exactly.
It's very tricky. It seems you don't
have the outlets. You don't have the, record stations used to get 700 CDs a week. This is before, there was any kind of internet digital downloading. And you can imagine that's probably double what that was now. Yeah. For people to get, and a lot of folks don't listen to radio anyway. They listen to, Pandora or, whatever. They don't really listen to radio like they did when I was growing up. So the promotion and things for these songs and stuff, the avenue is very, very narrow, and you have to get into the record companies still in order to get your stuff out there and get heard and get considered for a Grammy or whatever it might be. You're going to have to be with a major a major record label, and get major airplay and or video play and or whatever play as a songwriter, because and that costs $300,000-$400,000 a month for the record companies to pay out to get the promotion that you need, and everybody else throws their stuff into the ring, man. By the mile. Anybody can make a CD. You can make the artwork for the CD. You can burn the CD. You can distribute the CD. You can upload it digitally. You don't even need to make a CD. And there you have your stuff. So how many songs per day are uploaded on everything from YouTube to CD Baby to iTunes to whatever that are people are just putting out there? And, it's madness, man.
Yeah.
It is totally different than it used to be. This literally has changed everything in both of these industries simply because of the tech.
Yeah.
Which doesn't have a plateau. There's no plateau to this tech. It just keeps going up, and it keeps changing and evolving, but with no leveling off, you see.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see it keep on changing, and the rules and the environment will keep on changing with it as well. And we're not going to be stuck to one platform, to one way of listening to it. But obviously now I feel like we're in the streaming days. We have Spotify and Pandora and Netflix and Hulu. And now the thing to do is to stream everything. It's not a consumable good that you can buy in a store. It's just boom, straight to you. But I think, that will only be for a limited time. I think 10 years later, it's going to be something different, that we don't even see coming.
Yeah. What would that be, though? Because again, the thing about it is, like you said, right now, it's like the shape of a giant pyramid with a huge base and a very tiny top.
Yeah.
And that's all of everybody throwing all of their stuff into the mix. putting it all out there at the same time, it leaves, only a sliver of an audience for everyone. Whether it's the individual or whether it's the producer of the TV show or web series or whatever, it's just a tiny sliver of an audience unless there's some kind of buzz for that project, and that's, 1 out of 10 million opportunities that you're going to have to get a buzz, or, your song to hit and become really popular. It's 1 out of 10 million, all the stuff. It's just like a viral, upload on YouTube. There's only a handful that happens with, and they're gone 10 minutes later. Yeah. So where that is going to evolve, and as long as they can stream it or whatever the venue is getting the music out, I don't think that's going to change at all. I think the web is just going to become, bigger and stronger, and hopefully not, regulated to the point where we can't possibly use it right. But ultimately, it's going to be, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. The kids that are being born today are going to, they're going to be doing the same thing, if not times 100. How long does it go before anything anybody does, nobody ever hears, because there's so much of it out there.
Yeah. Yeah, it is crazy. We're experiencing a little bit of a difficulty here. I think we're speaking too much about the technology, and it's starting to revolt on us right here. But I think you're back.
Yeah.
And I guess the way to segue this would be, speaking on technology. You are most widely known for a show that ushered in a lot of this technology, and of course, I'm talking about Star Trek.
Yep.
And I kind of wanted to bring that up a little because you talked about like how the industry was when you started, and you kind of had to, like anything, you kind of got to work for it to keep going and get those bigger parts, and eventually you find yourself a part of this world, which is the Star Trek universe. And when we were looking you up, we found out, and I wanted you to talk a little bit on this. Before you became Tuvok, the role that you played on Star Trek Voyager, we heard on the internet that before you auditioned for this, you were actually fluent in Vulcan before that. Is that true?
No, I don't. I didn't. I didn't know anything about.
Good. I love finding out that the internet is false, because people believe everything there is supposed to be on the internet. But that leads me to my next question. You have found yourself a part of this larger Star Trek universe. Were you a fan of it before auditioning for the role?
Well, the story that I, have always told in that regard, and I know that was even, sort of misinterpreted because, again, my perspective on the current world and history before it goes back a ways.
Right.
It goes back before a lot of people. And at the time that I was going to school and college, there was only 3 channels. Mm-hmm. 3 channels. There was no internet. There was no cable. There was no nothing. It was movie theaters and 3 channels. And if you didn't, and there was not even a tape machine to tape the show. So if you didn't see it, you had to wait till it was repeated. Well, when syndication came in, they just kept playing the same television shows over and over. I know as much about Trek as I know about Gilligan's Island. I saw both of them for hours a week because that's all they played.
Yeah.
So they were on, you turn the channel and there it is. And you knew all the episodes and you knew everything about this. It was just repeated over and over and over again. Again, Andy of Mayberry, the Andy Griffith Show, I Love Lucy, Gilligan's Island, Star Trek, and a couple others. I mean, that's all they did. Every month, every year, all the time. And so I was familiar with it. Mm-hmm. Very familiar with it because I had seen them, there were some, and the stories were always good stories. That's been the history and tradition of that series, is always to have, thought-provoking stories. That's what Roddenberry wanted to do. Yeah. But as far as going to conventions and dressing up in costume, no, I wasn't doing any of that.
Yeah. And kind of also on the tech side, a question I like to ask actors who've had roles like you. I mean, you've been able to play just, the normal guy. Like you said, he went that away, like those types of characters. But in the Star Trek universe, especially playing the character of Tuvok that you did, you had a lot of heady dialogue. Was that a shift in your career, like having to kind of embody a character like that for so long? Did it start to become second nature to be able to speak like that? Because, again, a lot of your dialogue, it seems like it would take me a year just to be able to learn what you were saying.
Well, the type of dialogue that they used for Trek was it was written in a sort of a classical style because. Roddenberry was concerned about the fact that when you're trying to tell a serious story, but you're looking at a character with this bizarre makeup on their face, the point of what the character is making has to come through and has to be serious. You have to believe that this person is real. So the dialogue had to be written, very, very strictly and very, very specifically and in a classical type style. And I was lucky not to be the science officer or the medical officer because they had a lot of the tough stuff, man. The engineer, the medical officer, all that stuff, the science, they're the ones that had the heaviest stuff. I was lucky. I was tactical, so I didn't have to go through as many changes as, for example, Geordi LaForge. So it wasn't so bad for me. There was a lot of it, and it changed all the time. There was that headache. But ultimately, and that's typical with hour-long drama. But ultimately, it wasn't so tough for me at the time. Once I started doing it, it's like going to the gym. When you start memorizing stuff, eventually you're going to memorize it faster and faster and easier, and that's generally how it works. So for me at the time, it wasn't that difficult at all.
That's so interesting. And I can't not ask this question either because
you got to bring up Spaceballs.
I got to
right?
bring it up because we talked about working in the industry and getting to a point where you're starting to get the bigger roles. But another thing that you're known for, which is one of those adages, there are no small parts, is a very small part in the movie Spaceballs.
Right.
And I wanted to just ask you, was that a day shoot? Were you on the set for a single day for that, or was it longer than that?
No, just a day.
Yeah.
It was a day of work. It was just a gig for me at the time.
And it's incredible because just a gig, just a day of work, you show up, you say your line, it becomes one of the most iconic lines of the movie. And that's what I think is great is that really puts truth behind. There really are no small parts in that industry.
Did you know that movie was did you have any idea that movie was gonna be that big when you were there shooting that?
Absolutely not. No. When it came out, everybody liked it. It was a comedy. It was very funny. Everybody loved it because Star Wars had been out. All three of them had been out before then, and it was fine. And then, it just kind of went to sleep after that. And, it wasn't until only in the last maybe 5 years, 6, 8 years that all of a sudden there was a resurgence in the popularity of it, or there was an awakening to me of the popularity of it. I didn't know it had become a cult classic. I literally forgot about, most of those roles back then, but all of a sudden, I was working on some gig and people were talking about it and they were raving about it. And, at the time I said, well, I did the role about, he ain't found the shit. I did that part and they just they fell on the floor. Came back the next day with videotapes or whatever it was of the movie or DVDs and wanted me to sign all of them. And I was like, wow, man, I didn't realize that was such a big deal. But for some reason it became a really big deal. And it's ironic, as this business is. I got friends of mine who worked 3 weeks on a movie doing all this dialogue and scenes and none of it ends up in the movie. I get 4 words and nobody seems to have forgotten them. And when I say that, I mean literally, I think everyone I've ever spoken to knows that movie and knows those lines.
Yeah.
They know the scene. It's unbelievable, man, that, I can work 7 years on a series and more people know me from 4 words than they do from the series. That's true.
Wow.
I can say right now, more people would know me from Spaceballs or have seen Spaceballs than have watched Voyager. It's that simple.
Wow. Yeah, it's it's the nature of this industry, but it's so amazing that you can have a career that can span both areas where you have, and you can say that more people know you maybe from Spaceballs than Voyager, but Voyager was huge at the time. Yeah. Star Trek is an incredible community of fans and all that stuff. So to be able to be part of that is such a huge thing, and then also to be part of something where you uttered 4 lines and it'll be remembered forever. Like you have both of those adages. I think that's so wonderful. And on top of that too, I wanted to bring this up. You also do a lot of voice acting. You've done, which obviously for various Star Trek properties like video games and stuff like that. I also know you, one of my favorite games, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, you voiced the Black Panther, which is a movie that's coming out very soon, but you were first, so congrats on that. And I wanted to talk a little, do you enjoy doing the voice acting? Because I know a lot of actors sometimes who are screen actors kind of have to get in a different headspace to do a voice acting. Is it something that you enjoy?
Yeah, voice acting is very much a challenge, more so than acting, because you don't have the camera to work with. You don't have expression from your face to work with. Everything has to be done through your voice. So that means the emotional nuances and other things have to also come through in the dialogue. And that's the tricky part about doing that stuff. You don't realize it till you get in there and you're working with a director on it, and what he wants or she wants. You have to try to achieve it, and it's another notch or two above what you normally do. Your normal dialogue, it's easier to transition and do the dialogue, if you're reading for a role, to be able to use the voiceover techniques to influence the dialogue for an on-camera role. But it's much harder to go the opposite direction and try to read something, a character with a certain emotional pattern or a certain emotional beat. You have to convey that beat in the tone of your voice and the nuance of your voice. Maybe even the pattern in which you speak. All that stuff has to be conveyed in just dialogue, and that is really some tricky stuff. Everything from narration to doing character stuff, to doing audiobooks, to doing video games, to doing straight narration, and it is a very tricky bit. I do enjoy so much doing the animated projects and doing the voices for characters on animation. That process is nothing but a kick in the pants as far as getting in there and doing it, the actual work. And that is something I would love to. I've done it a little bit before on Cartoon Network. I'd like to do another extended series project on that, and I'm always trying out for those things. They're very hard to get, really hard to get.
Yeah, well, I hope you do, because I mean, in all honesty, I love your voice. I every time I get to hear your voice in some random thing like that, it's just I'm like, oh, there's Tim. I love it. So I hope you land one of those roles soon. One of the questions that we ask everybody on this show, and someone with your caliber of career, I think I'm really interested in your answer, is what fuels you? What is someone who has music in their background, acting, voice acting, television, movies, the whole nine.
And for such a long period of time,
what fuels you to keep going out there, going for the roles, and giving it your all?
Typically, it's the nature of the challenges. Number one, it's what I do. It's how I've made my living. So if I want to continue making a living, I have to keep going out for the roles and do the interviews and, create the projects that might get picked up or direct a film or something else that comes along. If it's a gig and it's paying, I have to consider that is just work. All it is just work. The way in which I'm working now is very different than when I started. It's a much more broad field between, behind the camera, voiceover work, et cetera, et cetera. But the acting is sort of on autopilot. It happens when it happens. I go up for it when I go up for it, and I take on the challenge, as it comes in. It's just work. It literally is what I've been doing for 35 years. So, for me, it's I get up, get the emails, get the phone calls, make the appointments, do the interviews, book the gig, do the gig, and then move on to the next one. now and evolving is just, is developing my own feature projects with other people. And that's something that I'm looking forward to doing as the back half of my career, because this is part B. After Voyager was completed, I started to expand, and I'd like to get more projects of my own up and running, whether they're series or feature. And I'm working with some very talented people with some connections and things to make those things happen, along with, again, many other people who are trying to do the same thing. But that's something that I look forward to now in terms of this career of mine evolving, because what keeps me going today is the fact that it's different than it was when I started. It is very different.
Awesome.
Well, speaking on, taking on projects, the big reason why we're here talking today is because of the up-and-coming series, Personal Space.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about Personal Space? I mean, we know a little bit about it. We know it's
such an interesting project.
Yeah, like a reality series idea, but it's astronauts in space. I don't know.
And it's done on such a low budget. I mean, it's such a refreshing thing, I feel, in the industry. What was it like working on this?
Well, it was for my role on there. It's not that big. I just have a couple of scenes on there. But when I was approached by the producer writer about it, he talked about the concept he gave me. I thought was just really smart, and it's also well written. And the nature of the concept and the way he was going to shoot it, and what happens in the story, I thought was absolutely fascinating. I mean, that's a really good twist that hasn't been done. It literally hasn't been done. The elements are borrowed from what we, our everyday, television and web life, but it takes place on this space mission, and he's melded the two together. So, when he talked to me about it, I thought, oh man, that's pretty cool. I may have to look into that and see what I can do on it. And it's great. I thought it was wonderful. Just again because of the concept, And you don't with independent projects. The most interesting roles that I have done, and the most varied roles that I have done, the biggest variety of those parts have all been on independent projects. Television, cookie cutter. It's the same stuff all the time. Independent films are the ones that you get a chance to do things you would never have a chance to do on television. Just wouldn't happen. So I enjoy these things come down the pike, getting to do them. Again, those roles will never. The stuff on my demo reel that I'm never going to take off because it looks different from what I typically end up doing, and it's day and night different. It's so unique and so standalone that I have to leave it on there, because it doesn't look like everything else. Doesn't have the same walk and talk, and that's really important. Yeah. So people approach me about these projects, and oh yeah, we got 20 cents to shoot it with, and we can only pay you this and that and whatever, So, well, if we're doing it, still doing it SAG or whatever, I'll go ahead and see what it looks like and see if we can make something happen, because it'll be something, guarantee it'll be something that I haven't done. It'll be a role that's different, it's unique, and it might be a concept that's very different and unique. So I love that, man. That's I'll take a shot at that more often than not.
Awesome. That is awesome. Finally, for our fans of this show and fans of you, where is the best way to follow Tim Russ? Do you social media at all, or do you have a website? Where's the best way people can follow you?
I'm on Facebook under Tim Russ. You can look me up there, and I've got my photo and myself and my daughter on there as well. I post stuff on Facebook that I'm usually working on. And I also have my own websites, timrusswebpage.com. So, if you Google my name, Tim Russ, the first thing that comes up is my website. So you can go on there. I keep the projects posted on there. I keep my appearances posted on there, where I'm going to be performing, where I'm going to be doing a convention or whatever. All of that is posted on there, and I keep it up to date. And otherwise, Facebook, I post stuff on there that I'm doing all the time, and usually we'll leave those public so people can see them.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking time to talk with us today, man. It was an absolute honor to talk with you.
Yeah.
You got it. Oh, the Twitter handle is Tim Russ too. I'm on Twitter as well. It's under Tim Russ, and you can look me up there. And I post stuff on Twitter as well. I don't live on those sites, but I do update them. I do let people know, here's what's happening. Here's what I just worked on. Here's what's going on. So, yeah, definitely can find out what's happening there.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, man. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us and talking to all our fans and all your fans. And this was really great. We're both really big fans, so this was really a treat for us, man.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
This has been Fueled by Deathcast, a Death Wish Coffee Company podcast production. Thanks for listening.